Okay, everyone. Well, it is 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and so we are going to go ahead and get started with this special session, which is dedicated to using the CONVERGE training modules in the classroom. And my name is Lori Peak, and I will be serving as the moderator for this session, and you will soon be meeting our esteemed panel. But first, we actually wanted to get to know a little bit about the folks who are on the call. And so we're going to do what Chris Gibb refers to as a chat cascade. And so if we could, if you're able, will you take to the chat box right now? And I'm going to just ask 3 short questions so we can get a sense of who is out there with us today. And so first, would you just drop your name and affiliation in the chat box? And welcome to our participants. Welcome, Kim. Welcome, Florence. Big thanks to Anais Roque, who is our volunteer for the session. Welcome, Jack, calling in from Canada. And hi, Blythe from Colorado State. Welcome. And I see a few other friends in there, so thank you. Okay, next, if you would please drop in the chat box, have you ever completed a CONVERGE training module? And so this one's either going to be a no if you haven't ever completed one, or if you have and you're a yes, would you put which one or ones you have completed? Okay, so far of our participants, Florence and Kim and Blythe and Jack are all no's, which is good. That's what we're doing today. So again, if you would take to the chat, if you are out there, and let us know, have you ever completed a CONVERGE training module? And welcome, Christopher. Also a no, that's good. We're gonna introduce these today. Okay, thank you. And then our third and last question is just, even if you haven't completed a module, have you ever used a CONVERGE training module in your teaching? Oh, nice. Chris, we got a yes from a participant. So Chris, will you follow on with that and tell us what class did you use the training module for at Arkansas Tech? Oh, Regina is very nice. Okay, all right. Well, thank you to all of the participants out there. So in these first couple of minutes, what I'm going to do right now is just give a brief overview of CONVERGE with a specific focus on the training modules, and then we are going to turn this over to our amazing panel. And so again, welcome. My name is Lori Peak, and I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Colorado Boulder. And I also serve as the director of the Natural Hazard Center. And in 2018, I received a National Science Foundation grant, which allowed me and the team here to establish the National Science Foundation funded CONVERGE facility, which is the one facility in a larger network of shared use facilities across the nation that is dedicated to advancing convergence research. It's also the only facility in the larger 12 facility network that's led by a social scientist. And so some of the things we do at CONVERGE are, again, focusing on advancing convergence research that is deeply interdisciplinary, that connects engineers, social scientists, and others across disciplines to characterize problems, but also to come up with solutions and adaptations to the problems. And in addition to some of the work around convergence that we do, we also are dedicated to identifying and coordinating researchers, as well as training and mentoring a diverse next generation of researchers in terms of research fundamentals, but also research ethics, as well as in terms of data publication and some other initiatives that we are leading through Converge. And so today, again, we're going to focus on that element of training and mentoring the next generation, and also making sure that researchers who are new to the hazards and disaster field have access to the decades and wealth of information that has been generated. So I'm actually going to turn now to the training modules. And so at the Converge website, which is at converge.colorado.edu, if you go to the website and you click on the resources tab, and then you can see there's a box here that's called training modules. And if you click on that, what you can see are the training modules that the team here has developed over the last several years. And I want to acknowledge postdoctoral scholar Rachel Adams, as well as graduate student Candace Evans, who have played a leading role in the development of these training modules. And we have also engaged nearly a dozen researchers who have contributed to these modules. And so right now, today, we have 8 modules that are available that focus on social vulnerability in disasters and synthesizing, again, decades of research in this area: disaster mental health, cultural competence in hazards and disaster research, institutional review board procedures and extreme events research, conducting emotionally challenging research, understanding and ending gender-based violence in fieldwork, broader ethical considerations, and collecting and sharing perishable data, which is our most recently released module. And so those are some of the key topics that we focus on. All of these modules are research and evidence-based. They are free online for anyone to access around the world, which is one of our core commitments in terms of the democratization of access to knowledge. And they take about 60 minutes to complete, although the modules vary in length quite a bit. Some about 30 minutes, some probably closer to 90 minutes to complete, but we say 60 on average. And why these modules were made, really the motivating force behind it was that I recognize, as I'm sure all of you do out there, that the hazards and disaster field is a highly event-driven field. And what happens is oftentimes people join the field after a big event happens, and we really wanted to try to figure out how can we quickly background people who are new to the field, as well as students and practitioners and others who may not have the time or just the access to, again, synthesize the decades of research in these different areas, and how could people come to a one-stop shop where they could get these resources. So that's sort of what the vision was behind the modules. And in terms of who uses them, so far we have had over 3,300 people who have registered for the Converge training modules. And the persons who've registered from the modules come from all 50 states, as well as 3 US territories. And they also come from 62 different countries around the world. And so we're really excited about who's been accessing the modules. Now, our focus today, everyone, is actually on some of the ancillary resources that we've been creating since we started the modules. So a couple of other things I wanted to point out was you actually get a continuing education credit for every module you complete, in case that's of use to practitioners you might partner with in particular. We also have annotated bibliographies we've been publishing, which include the research literature that we draw on in the modules. And then here, what we're going to focus on today, you can see the assignment bank. And so one of the things that we started doing after these training modules rolled out was we recognized that professors and instructors were using these training modules in their courses. And we were really excited about that. So when I see a big group of students register from a university, I'll oftentimes write a student and say, Can you tell me who assigned this at your university? And then I reach out to the professor, and that's how I found some of the people on the panel today. And so, and they very kindly submitted to this assignment bank. So what you can see here, there are lots of assignments for lots of different classes, and we're going to get to have a deep dive today from 5 of our star super users of the CONVERGE training modules. And so I'm going to just point out on here, and you can go to this website and you can actually download the assignment. And so the first person we're going to hear from today is Christine Gibb from the University of Ottawa. And here's what the assignments look like. And so you can go there, and we hope that this will help other instructors to use this in the class. So the way the panel is going to proceed now is Chris is going to take about 5 minutes to introduce herself, her assignment, and so forth. And then we're going to turn to Reggie Ferreira from the Tulane School of Social Work. Then we're going to turn to Rejina Manandhar from Arkansas Tech University. Then we're going to go to Olivia Vila, who's going to introduce her assignment. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Hans Louis Charles at Virginia Commonwealth about the assignment he created. So everyone, thank you so much for allowing me to give that brief overview. And please know how excited I am to hear from our panelists. And so Chris, let's turn it over to you. And if you would, when you introduce yourself, will you tell us what course did you use the module in? What was the discipline and year of the students? Which module did you use? And then tell us about the assignment and how it worked in your course. So thank you, Chris.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much for that introduction and the overview. And I'm glad this is being recorded, and I hope that we can actually keep that clip that you did of the overview of the modules and who's doing it and why it came about on the website, because that's exactly what our students need. I'm going to share my screen to give an overview of my assignment. And that. All right. So as Lori said, I'm Chris Gibb. I'm an assistant professor in the School of International Development and Global Studies.
Chris, I'm so sorry. Right now we're seeing the notes view. And so just in case you wanted to put it in the full screen view. Thank you and apologies.
Maybe I'll just go like this. Is this better?
Well, now we're not seeing the screen. Can you re-share, please? Thank you.
Let's see.
Perfect.
Are you seeing the whole thing now?
It's not in the, there it is. It's in the,
okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm in the School of International Development and Global Studies at the University of Ottawa. And for many students, the course that I teach in humanitarian action is the students' first and perhaps their only exposure to studying disasters and hazards. This is a course that I first created and taught in winter of 2021. It was an online course, and half of the course is focused on disasters and the other is on other humanitarian conflicts, forced migration issues. There's a lot of overlap between the two. So I've designed the course so that students are really dabbling in the world of practitioners. So there were lots of guest speakers from their practitioner world. We used resources used by practitioners like the CONVERGE modules, and the students did assignments that forced them to think like and communicate like practitioners. They had to work both alone and as part of a team. So the assignment that I am presenting today, it's called Create a Training Module, and the students work on it throughout the term, and there are both in individual and group parts. So I've highlighted the different parts on the slide. There are a lot of moving parts. So at the beginning, the students create a team of 3 to 5, And they put together a team contract that outlines their roles, the deadlines, the expectations they have of each other, the module topic that they want to explore, and so on. And we did this in an in-class workshop where we went over the various parts, why it's relevant to humanitarian work, and then they worked off of a template. The second part was an individual component where each student chooses one or more of the CONVERGE modules. And I suggested that each person does a different module as part of the team so they can come together and swap notes. Afterwards, each student does a 2-page evaluation of the module. So it's not an evaluation of this is good or I learned a lot. It's more along the lines of this is the structure, this is the language that's used, these are the key takeaways, this is how they're explained, and this is how they're tested. So the idea is that they're going to think about the best ways to create and put together their own modules. The third step is the groups put together a 20 to 25 page module. This is written on a topic that you think can help better prepare humanitarian workers who work in disaster or conflict contexts, or both. And this includes both a module and a quiz. They post it to the course website. Then each student will do a peer evaluation of 2 other groups' modules, and they'll use the same criteria they use for evaluating the CONVERGE training module at the beginning. And they post 2 questions to a Google Doc. The next step was to do an in-class coding workshop where everyone on the team reads the questions for their own module. They identify themes, they articulate 3 to 5 key questions that they'll answer in their oral presentation. So this part of the exercise is likened as the monitoring and evaluation, or the lessons learned phase of the project cycle. The next stage is to do the in-class presentations. So each group does a very brief introduction to their module, and most of the time is spent answering the questions from their peers that they've identified in the coding workshop. And the last stage was for the students to inform me whether or not I could share their module with the CONVERGE team. And this was not mandatory, and if I could use the module in subsequent years for pedagogical reasons. So I'm going to stop there, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. And I will put the link to your assignment in the chat box in a moment. Thank you for that overview. And next we are going to turn to Rejina.
Sure. So let me see if I can share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, it looks great.
Yeah, so I'm just going through the assignment that I created, and I'll let you know like which class I used for and what exactly the students are doing in my class. Before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Rejina Manandhar, and I'm an associate professor of emergency management at Arkansas Tech University. I teach both graduate as well as undergraduate courses at Tech, and I also teach both online as well as in-person classes. So this assignment that I created was for a graduate required course. So it's a course that focuses on research design and methods. So one of the objectives of this particular course was to provide students understanding on challenges related to research, particularly disaster research. What are the things that they need to pay attention to when they are doing research? And in addition to that, this class also provides them understanding on disaster research methods and things of that nature. But another thing that is also important and is discussed in this class is the importance of cultural competence in disaster research. Since as a disaster future disaster researcher or practitioner, they might have to work with people from diverse backgrounds in different settings. I think it's very important for them to know the challenges associated with that, and as well as the things that could help them to build that cultural competence. So that's why I assigned this particular module. Now, please keep in mind that when I started this module as an assignment, it was an extra credit assignment. So all I told them to do was to complete that module and upload the certificate on the Blackboard. That's what I told them. However, now what I'm doing is I made CONVERGE modules part of my assignment. It's required assignment in my classes, and I'm using CONVERGE module in 2 of my classes. One is the Research Design and Methods class, which is a graduate course, and another class that I'm using it is the Social Dimensions of Disaster, which is an undergraduate course, and I'm using 5 modules. It's been good. I've got very positive feedback from students, so I'm going to talk about that later. But this is the assignment that I created. So I told them how they could access the CONVERGE training module, what they need to do in order to get that certificate, and upload that certificate in the Blackboard. And as well as, in addition to that, I also told them that this particular module, like once they have completed, it can go to their, they could add them in their resume. So things of that nature. Yeah, thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Nice. Thank you so much, Regina. And it looks like I'm not sure if Chris is one of your students or TAs who joined us. Chris Sheesh.
He's an instructor in our department.
Oh, an instructor. Very nice. And he said he's used them as well. So thank you to Arkansas Tech. And so next, we're going to turn it over to Reggie at Tulane University.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Laurie and Chris, for organizing the panel. So I'm Reggie Ferreira. I go by Riachard or Reggie. I'm from South Africa originally. Please spare a thought for the civil unrest currently happening in my country. So sending positive vibes for my countrymen. I'm a tenured associate professor at Tulane School of Social Work, and I've also been director of the Disaster Resilience Leadership Academy for the past 5 years, where I mainly teach human and social factors of disasters. I just want to briefly give an overview of what the Academy is. You know, we're in the School of Social Work. We were founded after Hurricane Katrina, and we're really focused on the intersection of the physical environment, socioeconomic, political institutions, and with an emphasis on vulnerability, and then also promoting social justice and environmental justice. And I have to share this because we're an interdisciplinary program, and the CONVERGE modules has actually been great for us in that regard. We have students from 26 different disciplines in our program. You know, so it's very helpful because oftentimes, you know, we have engineering students coming in, we have medical students coming in, and they really can't fully grasp certain topics. And the CONVERGE modules has been really great. So the class I teach is the human and social factors of disaster, and it's across all 3 of these modalities. It's online and on ground. So yeah, there's the human and social factors piece. Going forward, the research modules, we're also incorporating that with our measurement and evaluation courses. And I just developed an undergraduate course, morphology of disaster, and 2 of the modules is there. So with the psychosocial resilience, the human and social factors class that I teach, it's quite holistic. Like I mentioned, we are interdisciplinary, so oftentimes there's not enough time to do deep dives, you know, on subject matter. That's where the CONVERGE modules have actually been really great for us. But yeah, so we do systems approach, focusing on the individual, family, household, the community, and how their resilience is pre-disaster, post-disaster. Theory, policy is always important. You know, social vulnerability and climate change and mental health also forms part of the course, and that's where the social vulnerability and disaster mental health training modules come in. So the exercise that I developed is actually a tabletop exercise. So students need to come up with a scenario for each of the modules. They pair up in teams of 2, And they work with me as the instructor to design their tabletop, and then they actually get an opportunity to implement it in class. It's roughly a 30-minute exercise, but they have to be as realistic as possible with the particular exercise that they're doing, and it's engaged. I've seen, and we'll talk about recommendations later. But it's very, very engaging, the tabletop aspect, and it's also sort of applying real world experiences, and the modules provide that theoretical underpinning and just pure disaster research that's associated with it. Once the tabletop exercise is done, so this is for the social vulnerability and disaster mental health modules. We do usually, after the exercise, we do a social vulnerability mapping exercise, where we use the CDC's data. And then with the disaster mental health aspect, since leadership is in our program's name, we have a heavy emphasis on leadership principles. And the takeaway message that's linking with the CONVERGE module is looking after yourself, your own mental health, but that of your staff as well. Once you go into the field, because burnout is a reality. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Thank you, Reggie, very much. And you're reminding me that when we rolled out the first module almost 2 years ago to the date, it was the social vulnerability. And we were very fortunate that a group of about 30 undergraduate engineering students actually were some of our first testers, along with social science students here at the Hazard Center. And it was great to get the feedback from undergraduates across those disciplines, because we were really trying to write at a level where it would be accessible in that way. So that's great to hear about the interdisciplinary nature of your program.
Yeah, it's really been breaking down barriers, the CONVERGE module. So thank you, Lori.
Nice. Thank you, Reggie. And now we are going to turn it over to Olivia Vila at North Carolina State University, who's here sort of wearing two hats as both an instructor, but also as a leader of a graduate student organization who were some of our early adopters. And so Olivia, over to you.
Yes, hello. I'm going to try to cover both of them, and I'm really going to present the graduate student perspective on how these resources can be useful. So I'll focus it both on the class version and the student organization version. So, and I'll focus less on my assignment itself and more on the context and how this can be useful. But I encourage you all to check out the assignment. So sometimes as graduate students, you are required or put in a position where you need to do a guest lecture for your instructor, for your advisor or whoever. And that can be a really intimidating experience to have to craft a class on your own. Also imposter syndrome at teaching students when you yourself feel like you're just a student, it can be really difficult. So I think that these CONVERGE training modules are a really great foundation for graduate students to use and create guest lectures for their for the circumstances that come up to do those, which are really great experiences to do them, but they're also very scary. So that's exactly what I did, and that's what my assignment is based on. It's a guest lecture assignment. So basically what I did was I first did the module itself. I took the course, the training, and that was good because it gave me confidence. It made me feel like I was refreshed on the knowledge I knew. And then the additional bibliographies that are provided gave me extra resources for me to continue to go prepare. So I felt that I had extra knowledge that I could use if students had questions, which is another scary thing for students to ask you questions you don't know. So it just helped you feel prepared, and it also helped you kind of have resources that you could refer them to if you didn't feel comfortable responding. And then the module itself gives you a really good structure through which to think about crafting your class. So I would say that, my first solo guest lecture, which was a 2-part, it was very scary, but the CONVERGE training modules gave me a starting point that I so very much appreciated. So I would encourage grad students to use them in that way. And so you're also learning, but you're also helping other students learn. And then the other part is, as Lori mentioned, the grad student organization. So I am part of a grad student organization called HasNerds at NC State. And well, we really started when we started using the modules it's very informal. I guess you would say it's not as structured. There isn't a specific assignment, but essentially what we do is we decide on a module we want to take, we take it, and then we get together for a social event to discuss in more detail what we learned. No particular structure, but I think it's good because it allows you to elaborate. And HasNerds is an interdisciplinary student group. So people are coming from all different levels in terms of their understanding and experience with hazards work. So these modules are really great for breaking the ice and getting everyone on the same page. And a lot of times with student organizations, you're really encouraged to show that you're doing professional and academic development activities. So I think that these training modules are like a no-brainer in terms of like an easy access thing you can do with your group. And I would encourage, making it a little fun and exciting for students. So it's a great way to be social and also get some good work done. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope we can talk more about this. I hope there's grad students in the room that I can talk more to.
Nice. Thank you so much, Olivia. And I tried to contribute to the HasNerds Pizza Fund, but Olivia wouldn't let me do that. But it was so exciting to see the students come together to do these modules and to discuss them. So thank you. And last but not least, we're going to go from North Carolina to Virginia. So Hans Louis Charles at Virginia Commonwealth University, will you share with us your intro and how you've used the modules and the assignment? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As Lori mentioned, my name is Hans Louis Charles. I'm an assistant professor at the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs at VCU. And at VCU, I teach both undergrad and graduate level courses in risk and vulnerability assessment, as well as disaster response and recovery in the Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness program. And our programs really prepare students to work in the field. So many work at the local and state level in emergency management agencies. I utilize the social vulnerability and disaster module the most, and I use them both in my undergrad and graduate level courses. And those courses are in person and since the pandemic, online, both synchronous and asynchronous formats. And I also use the disaster mental health module as well as an extra credit. And I'm looking forward to using more of the modules. So the course actually is one that I took over, and it was heavily focused on critical infrastructure protection. So I wanted to introduce the students more to the research side and the literature on social vulnerability. So I created a segment of the course around social vulnerability and equity. And I think some of the readings may be difficult for the students to really digest. So having them complete the module really reinforces some of the findings of the literature, helps them really digest it a bit better, and start thinking about ways, not just vulnerability, but also equity. How can we put that into place in the field, right? So when you're in the field, how can we think about more about equity? So I use the CONVERGE module as part of this segment, and it builds on previous segments of the class and sort of leads up to a discussion about social vulnerability and equity in disaster response and disaster preparedness in general at the local level. So for each semester, I try to design a disaster scenario that they respond to in a discussion format. So if I could share my screen, I'll kind of show you the scenario that it's sort of written in the assignment bank, but I was able to get a little bit of funding to spice it up a bit. And I created a short video, which sort of gets the students' attention more, but it's more or less the same as reading it, but just so that's a bit more entertaining to them. I created this one video around high hazard dams. So if I could figure out how to do this here, I will show you the assignment, and I'm open to any questions you may have. So just if I could just see it, you can see this or not, just let me know.
Yeah, yes, we can see the video.
All right, great. Let me play it for you. All right.
You are a new intern in the local office of emergency management for a small county in your home state. Your supervisor has asked for some assistance with reviewing the county's existing flood risk assessment and has given you all the documentation you need to verify the assessment's findings. While comparing the assessment with the up-to-date land records, you notice that there isn't any mention in the assessment of a privately owned dam in the northwest of the county. This dam, part of the artificial lake serving a population of 25,000 people, has been rated a high-hazard dam and has the potential to devastate the surrounding community if it fails. Based on the assessment, the areas with the highest flood risks include a homeless shelter, an assisted living community, an elementary school, and a public housing complex. With the information on the staggering potential for disaster in hand, you contact the dam's owner and ask them if they have an up-to-date emergency action plan ready in case of disaster. To your shock, not only is the EAP not up to date, there is not even an effective warning system in place for the at-risk community. After informing your supervisor, she tells you to work with the dam owner to update their emergency action plan and propose an effective warning system for the community that uses state-of-the-art technology, as well as a redundant backup system that uses low-tech solutions in case there's a power grid failure. For this assignment, post your proposal to the discussion board. Your proposal should be approximately 250 words and should include features that can reach the most vulnerable populations mentioned, as well as a method to educate the public about the new warning system. This part of your assignment is worth 15 points. Be sure to synthesize and cite the content of your proposal from the course modules on social vulnerability, risk assessment, public-private partnerships, modern technology, and warning systems. After your initial post, respond to at least 2 other students' posts in your group with a few short but substantive comments. This part of your assignment is worth 10 points. Good luck, and remember that diligence on your part is what saves lives.
Great, thank you. And that's it for me.
Hans, you have several of your fellow panelists who are hoping to become your students, so you may get some transfer students to VCU. So that is so impressive. And we actually, I was going to pick up, our next question is about how, once you did this assignment with your classes, how you've improved upon or changed it. But I'm actually gonna, with this round robin, I'm in the context of that question, I'm gonna ask Chris to follow on what Hans just mentioned, because Hans mentioned that he got a little extra funding. And so Chris also recently received some funding around some of our teaching and use of these modules. And so Chris, in answering that question about how you've received, revised your assignment over time, we also weave into your answer how you were able to seek out and secure funding to continue to build on your assignment. Thank you. And then I'm going to go to Rejina next.
All right. So in response to the funding, there's a small pool of money at the University of Ottawa to transform a course into a social innovation course. And so through that, you work with a community partner and you help to solve a problem that they identify. So we're going to be partnering probably with MSF and developing training modules that respond to their particular needs. So we'll be pitching ideas to the organization, getting their response, and then developing the modules that specifically respond to MSF's needs in both a conflict situation and a disaster situation. So that's really exciting. That's a process that I'm going through this summer. So setting up that partnership. Advice to anyone who wants to try having their students make a training module assignment. I would say that scaffolding is really key. You have to chunk it. You can't just give them everything at once. The slide that I showed where you break down all the individual parts was really important. and having lots of feedback along the way, because students weren't accustomed to doing an assignment oriented towards a practitioner audience. So they're really used to writing academic papers, not used to communicating in plain speak and really zeroing in on key points without putting in all of the fluff that sometimes comes into student papers. Another thing that I would do early on is I would schedule a check-in where each group meets with the prof or the TA. The team contract worked pretty well in stemming off any problems, but we did have a few bumps along the way. And I think a check-in just to make sure that everyone understood what's involved and having people actually see you face to face or over a screen would be helpful. Other notes would be to encourage the groups to use other formats for their module apart from just a written document. So this is something that's going to come into the social innovation part of the course next year. So developing either a video. Hans's video was amazing. So I may even show something along those lines just to say this is something that you can do to illustrate what's some of the issues are. Or doing a website, something a little bit more interactive. And what I would have done is I would have provided the students with a template right at the beginning where they have to fill in, yes, I give permission to Christine Gibb to share my module with the CONVERGE team right at the beginning, rather than running around at the end of the semester trying to get permission from the students.
Nice. Thank you so much, Christine. And Rejina, have you, based on your own assessment or student feedback, have you modified things about your assignment?
Yes, as I initially mentioned, like the first time I used CONVERGE module, I use it as an extra credit assignment. So the only thing that they needed to do was to complete the module. But now, in addition to completing that module, they also do a reflection on what exactly did they learn, what were the strengths of the module, is there any weaknesses and things of that nature. And not just that, like I don't just simply use a module without doing any research. I first myself have completed all the modules before I give that to the students, to know like how that particular module fits into my class. So my suggestion to other instructors would be do it yourself. Don't hesitate to complete it. I mean, do it yourself to see how it fits into your course. So I think that is very helpful. Another thing that I've done is I've encouraged students not just to complete those modules, but also to check the resources. Under each module, there is resources, and under those resources, you have links, you have annotated bibliographies, you have websites, and even additional tests and assessments that they can do. And I think that's a wonderful tool for both instructors as well as students. So I have encouraged them to do that as well.
Nice. Thank you for saying that, Rejina. And the great thing about these modules being online, they're up in a learning management system, is we can update those modules at any time. And so we always invite people, if they find additional resources that we should have in that list as new publications come out. Hans, when your recent article came out in ethics on ethics and disaster research, we were able to fold that into an already published module. And so that is the beauty of the online format. So thanks for bringing in those additional resources and for that advice, Rejina. Reggie, have you done anything to modify your assignment based on feedback or your own assessment?
Sure, Lori. Yeah, so we've been using the CONVERGE modules now for, I believe, 5 semesters, and we're actually about to do a course refresh. So we have the on-ground and the online. So what I found is what works really well with the tabletop exercises to model first for the students, do an exercise yourself that they can sort of see how it should play out. Then with the in-person on-ground students, what I've seen is that one should use more Socratic questions. That really gets them thinking and going. And then with the online students, what I found is that they actually need more time because they're in breakout rooms. But yeah, overall, dry run, let the students do a dry run between themselves, let them do a check-in with the instructor as well. And then you as the instructor yourself need to be familiar with the modules and actually complete them as well. And then one thing that sort of stems from the CONVERGE modules as well is we've got critical reading questions. So there's actually some of the articles that's part of the modules that we've incorporated as part of class sessions, and the students choose one of those articles that really resonates with them, and they have to say or like come up with there's 3 basic questions. So what was the argument made by the authors on the article? That's then followed with what can they take away from the particular article, and what are they going to implement from that article in their future practice. So yeah, but that's all linked again back to the module.
Very nice. Thank you, Reggie. And Olivia, anything you've adjusted or updated?
Well, I'm going to kind of interpret that question to apply it to the student organization stuff. So with the student organization, it's a little different because you can't require students to take it as you can in the class. So I haven't done this, but I've kind of brainstormed some potential improvements around engagement with these CONVERGE trainings. So with students, depending on when the opportunities come up, when in the semester, they're going to be more or less likely to engage. So I think that one thing that would be really helpful would be to have kind of a clear kind of output that they can show for having done the training. So what can they put on their CV line, or what's like a statement that they can include in a graduate research grant application, so that you can say like, oh, it's not just for you to like learn some stuff, which is great, but this can also directly apply to the research grants or the fellowships you're applying to, or the, your job search. So I think that would be really great, because I know grad students do a lot of work that kind of remains invisible, and sometimes your time is pulled in so many directions. So I think that if there was also this like extra perk, that would be a good way to engage, because some people needed that little extra incentive. And then I think that just in talking to you all and hearing you all talk and like discussing this, I thought that maybe this isn't really an assignment bank thing, but maybe like a process sheet for grad students approaching their first guest lecture and how they can use the CONVERGE training. So that would be really cool. Maybe I can help work on that, but just like, what was my process? How did I start, and how did I kind of work my way up, and maybe have some teaching resources. So that could be a cool thing to do and an improvement to make.
Nice. Thank you, Olivia. And I'll give a shout out again to I love your point about what goes on the CV once you've done these. And one of the things that we've built into the modules is that there are knowledge checks throughout. And that was something we did because of undergraduates who said, we need something to keep us on track and not just sort of skipping through the whole thing. And so we added knowledge checks at the end of each lesson, but then at the end, there's a 10-question quiz, and the team here actually writes about 30 to 35 questions. So the questions are always on a rotator, so your students are never going to get the same questions. But then they also get a certificate at the end. And something we just did a few months ago, thanks to a partnership with the International Association of Emergency Managers, we wanted to make sure that when people do these modules that they could actually get that kind of professional credit, something that could go on their CVs. And so now when you do a module, they're worth 1 contact hour of general management training through the International Association of Emergency Managers. And that's automatically put on your certificate you get at the end. It's right there, and you can submit that to IAEM. And so right now, about 60% of the people who complete our modules are students, but we're hoping through having that connection that even more practitioners may be able to take this and get credit. So yeah, so thanks, Olivia, for that sort of motivating force point that you made. And then Hans, last but not least, over to you. Have you modified your assignment in some kind of way over time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the video, for example, is one way I've modified it, but I've also sort of gradually expanded the section or the segment of the course around social vulnerability. because many of my students, this is the first time, like some of the content the module covers, for many of them, it's the first time they're hearing any of it. So I think having a discussion in the classroom is helpful for them to sort of understand why this is important and vital to the field of emergency management, especially since a lot of them will be at the local level. So really grasping that information, having more in-depth conversation, or these difficult conversations, right? Or what are they called? The brave conversations, right? In the classroom. I think it really helps those conversations. So just actually expanding it more and more within my class has been helpful, really reinforcing the value of the module itself. So it's not just a discussion about social vulnerability, but also something that they could take away and put on their CV and show that, they do have some sort of, grounding in what this means.
Thank you, Hans. That is super helpful. And I'm going to pick up on the next question for the panel, and we'll do another round robin here. This one is really related to the fact that we recognize you all wear multiple hats, that you are fabulous teachers and obviously thoughtful teachers, but you're also researchers and you're out there doing great research work. And so one of the questions we were hoping you would reflect on is, what are things that you would like to see the CONVERGE team develop? So either develop here, or as Olivia already mentioned, that you're already developing in the context of your classroom or your research to support the efforts that you are trying to advance. So sort of like we've developed this annotated bibliographies, the extra resources, the assignment bank. Are there other supporting resources that you would like to see developed to help make these more usable and useful for both students, but as well as perhaps others in your sphere, like researchers? And so, Chris, you want to kick us off again, please? Thank you.
So I'm going to basically say what I've written to you in a couple of emails about what I think would be really helpful to my students for the assignment. So one, it would be great to have a behind the scenes video that would be posted to the assignment and the CONVERGE module page. And that would be basically what Lori presented at the beginning of this panel. So why are these modules out there? How are they produced? Who uses them? Why are they needed? And it would be really important for my students in development studies, because we spend a lot of time talking about the production of knowledge and transparency and why it's so important, and looking at power and issues of power. So knowing about how these modules are produced helps to reinforce what they're learning in other aspects of their courses. And it also forces them to think about those questions when they're developing their own modules. Another one, again, this is coming from a development studies perspective, is to have more international content in the module, just in some of the examples. And if possible, it'd be great to have some of the modules available in other languages. So if there's a donor who wants to translate them, that would be fantastic. Another idea would be to expand some of the modules to look at the intersection between disasters and other humanitarian emergencies. So helping the students or other practitioners think about how disasters can intersect with conflict or forced migration, displacement. And I guess the last one would be if there was a module template that the students could use and just type in, and so the formatting looks quite nice.
Nice, thank you, Chris. All duly noted and wonderful ideas. Rejina, any suggestions, thoughts?
I think most of my things that I was thinking, Chris already mentioned it, but yeah, I mean, adding more international examples or perspectives would be very helpful. And also, like, I would like to commend the CONVERGE team. I mean, you all have done a wonderful job. It's easy to comprehend. I mean, my students have said that they have started thinking about concepts that they have never thought about. So it's really good. So I would like to commend you on that. And also the resources. I think like for me as an instructor and for students, I mean, those resources there, those are wonderful resources for students as well as instructors. And as you mentioned, like you've been updating that. So I would want you to continue doing that so that we get to see new studies as well. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And that is a great point about the international examples. And one of our full-time researchers here at the Natural Hazard Center, she does a lot of international research, and she's always sort of pushing us in all of the modules to put in more examples. And some of that is due to that sort of US dominance in a lot of the disaster research literature, right? That so much of the literature is coming out of US-based researchers writing about US-based disasters. Some of it's our own linguistic shortcomings that we're not always able to access writings in other languages and so forth, but that is definitely, we hear that feedback loud and clear and really appreciate it, Chris and Regina, all of it. So thank you. And Reggie, suggestions or thoughts that you've been contemplating around revisions or new support resources?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat my colleagues, but just something that comes to mind. And there is elements of it in some of the modules, but the JEDI concept, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Again, as the West, we're sometimes very imperialistic with the approach. So having a module on community collaboration that we can combat like decolonization, or that we can actually implement decolonization. So a community collaboration module. I know, again, there's elements throughout all the modules, but like a standalone module, I just personally think would be great.
Nice, thank you, Reggie. And Olivia.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make this more broadly applicable than just to student organizations and kind of grad students. But the inspiration is that, for example, when we do this with the student organization, we want to have a more social environment. We want to have food, or we want to have, extra stuff that people can join around, just extra incentives to get people involved, again, related to that. We're not forcing them. They have to come of their own free will. But I think, and this relates to some of the things you all were talking about, which was extra funding opportunities that might be available to enhance the experience with the CONVERGE training. So Hans, you did that cool video. Chris, you had mentioned some extra funding that you received or that you're working with. And I think that, more broadly, it would be great to have some ideas at least about how you can search for funding, or what funding can support, or what might be some common university sources, or if there's something outside of the university that might be helpful. So I think that ways to enhance, and I think that would kind of foster innovation in using the CONVERGE trainings, is if there is some sort of funding source somewhere, or ideas where you can access that to push that forward. And then also, this is more grad student oriented, but maybe some templates for like advertising, like social media, little kind of blocks or something that has the training, has like a snippet about the training that we could just put in, like our university, or like the location information, event information, or whatever. But I think having like advertisement templates that are visually appealing, like Twitter friendly, would be really great. And I wouldn't have to do it. I thought about it, but I don't have the time to work on that.
Nice. Thank you, Olivia, very much for those suggestions. And Hans?
Yes, I have nothing negative to say. I love them. My students love them. I think in the beginning there was, I'm not sure, a challenge with doing it multiple times. If you failed to pass the first time, I'm not sure if you could do it again, but I think myself, sorry. That was the only challenge my students had, because some of them didn't pass the first time and they couldn't do it. So I'm not sure where that stands, but I really have nothing negative to say. I really look forward to the new modules. 1 second, Olivia. I did think of something. But I do have a suggestion. I don't know if it fits in or how you could fit it in, but the community itself, the academic, the research community, we have lost a few giants in the field. Dennis Milletti, Quarantelli, Dines, and even those that have not passed on, have really contributed a lot. So I don't know if there's a way to do a module where we kind of go through the work of, say, oh, this is the work that Dennis Milletti has done. So the students really could connect the research and the research findings to that scholar or that school of thought, etc. I don't know if that would be helpful, but I think I would definitely appreciate it, to see the work Joel Scanlon has done, and Milletti, especially the ones who have passed on. Also yourself, Lori, and Father Gil as well. A lot of the work you've done, and Tierney. There's so many, right? There's so many, and I think it's a great way to kind of highlight the work that you all have done.
Thank you for that. And that reminded me of a question that Chris has asked me a couple of times that I didn't address in the intro to this, but Chris had asked me, how do you decide on the topics that you've had in the modules? And so it's been sort of a mix of when I wrote the CONVERGE proposal to the National Science Foundation. Like, I had a vision for what these modules would look like and the content that they would address. And so some of the core topics that you see now were identified in that grant proposal, but a lot of it has also been through feedback like this. So sort of community-driven feedback of people saying, well, we need a module on interdisciplinary methods is one of the ones that we're hopefully going to be working on over this next year, because we've heard that a lot from our engineering colleagues who use these, that they said, we'd really like to know about the methods. Some of it has been funder driven, that NSF funds the CONVERGE facility, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have supported several of these modules specifically. And so the CDC was really interested in having that module on social vulnerability, on disaster mental health. Right now, we're working on one on public health and disasters to support research calls in public health and disasters, but so they have that baseline information. And so it's been sort of a mix of our ideas for what's needed, what funders are really interested in, and then what our members of our research community have asked for. And so this is kind of an open call if there are other ideas on that. And I wanted to pick up on Kim Mosby asking the chat, but I'm going to ask Chris to answer this out loud so everybody can hear it. So Kim, back at the beginning, when Chris was talking about having her students write a module, Kim asked, did any of them sort of raise to the level that she passed it along to CONVERGE? And so Chris, would you share what the module was that you ended up sending over to us? Because that's another way that we're now tapping into some module topics.
Yeah, so there were 7 different groups in the class this semester, and one of them agreed to pass along their module to the CONVERGE team. And it was a module on researcher positionality, practitioner positionality, being aware of who you are, your different social locations, and how that affects the work that you'll do in the field, how you'll be interacting with local organizations and disaster survivors. And so that was shared with Lori and her team, and there was a very positive response. And it looks like that we'll be seeing how we can take the student module and building it up so it's the quality of a CONVERGE module. So I don't know how that step works. So I'm very curious to follow along with that particular process too.
Yes, and we were so excited to see the topic of positionality. So Kim, again, thanks for that great question. And something I was going to say about that is the emotionally challenging research module that we have up there. That one was actually completely graduate student driven. There were 3 graduate students here at CU Boulder who came to me and said they were all doing research in incredibly emotionally challenging contexts. And they said, is there a literature out there on doing this kind of emotionally challenging work in disasters? And I said, let's find out. And how about you come and work here for the summer and write a module on it? And so that it really was led by these 3 amazing students. And then right now, 3 other graduate students, one of them who's on the call, Jessica Austin, is co-leading a new module on reciprocity in research, and how do we do reciprocity in ethical ways in our research. And so when Chris wrote me about positionality, we said yes, 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 and look at how these things are all connecting together in terms of, again, emotional challenges, ethics, positionality, reciprocity, and so forth. And so this leads to another thing that we're hoping over time. We have 8 modules right now. We have 3 actively in progress that are going to roll out this next academic term. And so we are hoping that we might be able to move toward that kind of credentialing system that Olivia was referring to earlier. So there's something more that you can put on your CV as you move through this. And so again, we are just so inspired by all of you and wanted to check in because we have just under 10 minutes left in this session. And Kim Mosby is putting some amazing topics in the chat of possibilities. She said the possibility for community engagement in disaster research. How do you get funding for disaster research? She also loved the history of the field and the key researchers in the field as a topic that Hans had raised. And Luther Green chimed in and said, how about data sharing? And so great ideas. And to our participants out there, if you have any questions of the panel that you want to pose, we would love it if you have a question or just even a suggestion that you want to chime in with. We'd love to spend our remaining time hearing from all of you. So again, if you have any questions, we'll be watching the chat. And otherwise, what I think we're going to do now is just kind of a quick closing round robin as we're waiting to see if any questions do roll in, just to ask how students responded to this. And so maybe we'll take 1 minute for everybody. And again, Chris, you've been our leader all along. And so Chris, would you kick us off with how have your students responded, the good, bad, ugly, and happy?
One quick sentence on how the students responded to this particular assignment. They found it challenging, but they really found it a rewarding experience. And they're very enthusiastic. And in the end of the semester feedback, they said, this is an assignment that you should definitely keep for future students. But what I wanted to respond to how students responded, I'd used the assignment just to do the module and to submit the certificate in another class. And I had an Indigenous student who responded quite negatively to the questions about just the demographic questions, identifying your race or ethnicity. Here in Canada, the term Indian is quite offensive. So in the US, it's a legal term, and in Canada it is, but you wouldn't self-identify for the most part as Indian. You would specify your nation, that kind of thing. And so the student had written saying she was quite upset by this question. I forwarded the email to Lori, and within, 3 days, you had changed the questions. And so she had asked for appropriate language. We got feedback from the Indigenous pedagogy specialist at the University of Ottawa on the language that was appropriate, and it was changed. So if you have comments from your students, I would strongly recommend you forward them on to the CONVERGE team because they're super responsive. It's the fastest response I've ever had. And the student was very happy.
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. And it was an important moment for us because we were using the census categories for race and ethnicity, but as we're trying to reach a global audience, as we know, US categories do not always translate. And so we really appreciated that feedback. And so thank you sharing that. And yeah, thank you so much. And we'll go to Regina.
Yeah, so for me, like I don't remember getting any negative feedbacks on the CONVERGE training module reflection assignments. I mean, students mentioned that, I mean, it was easy to comprehend in their reflection. It was easy to comprehend, and they got to learn about things that they had not considered before. And not just that, it even reinforced what I've been teaching in the class. Like I do use a textbook, I do use articles and other stuff that focuses on that concept, but it reinforced what they've already learned, and it was a good thing. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Reggie.
Yeah, it's mainly been positive. I mean, there hasn't been any negative feedback. One thing that the students really enjoy, or like sort of the takeaway, is that they're able to put it on their CV or resume, you know, so that's really the main takeaway is like they don't feel that it's busy work, you know, so there's actually something tangible that they can take outside of the class. So yeah.
Thank you. And Olivia, feedback from both your fellow graduate students and or in your class.
Yeah, so I mean, like everyone, I haven't really received negative feedback. I haven't done like a formal evaluation, but I wanted to say that, Lori, if you need formal evaluations, let us, or I'm a volunteer, let me know. I can always do that. I think that the people that use this resource would be happy to do evaluations with their students, and the students would be willing. I think that it's a good change of pace for lecture classes that are heavy on lectures. So being able to like put that in a strategic place, I think the students really appreciate that. And as I said, with the kind of intro on using it with grad students in our group, it's just like such a great icebreaker. We're in lots of different disciplines, so it can be kind of weird. We're coming in from different places. So I think it's a really good tool to break the ice and engage and like have thoughtful discussions, and to also see where each other's like expertise and interests are.
Thank you for that, Olivia. And that's reminding me that in the training module 2 at the outset, we ask knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So we ask 3 pre-evaluation questions, and then we ask at the end about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And we actually, under the leadership of graduate student Candace Evans, just published our first evaluation of the modules to show that they really are changing knowledge, skills, and attitudes among the users. And Rachel Adams is leading a second evaluation paper that we just got an R&R on. And so we really are trying to track change over time as people take the modules. But I love that idea of us also doing more tailored evaluation work. So thank you for that. And then Hans, over to you for any closing comments.
I echo everyone on the panel. The feedback has been very positive. And I think it was Christine who mentioned in the chat that the knowledge checks as well in the module has been very helpful for the students as well. They enjoy the format and the information covered. And I would say that for a lot of my students who come from, racial, ethnic, minority backgrounds, it's very encouraging to them to see that the field of hazard and disaster mitigation cares about these topics. And it's not just me ranting in the classroom, but the field itself is really prioritizing these issues, and the work that yourself and Deborah Thomas, I think, is on the chat as well, the excellent work you'll have done throughout the years. So I say thank you to you and to the field and to the Natural Hazard Center for the great work you're doing.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you to this entire panel and to our participants who've been here today and listening. And I saw Florence ask a question about the data science and data science techniques. And so definitely we'll be reaching back to Florence about that. And so thank you to all of the participants for being here. As super special thanks to our panelists, to Olivia, Regina, Reggie, and Hans, and especially to Chris for proposing this panel and for helping to bring us all together. And just everybody, we hope you will take advantage of the modules that are there and know that we can continue to update and improve upon them. And so with that, we are now at the close of our session time. So again, just a hearty thanks to the panel, and we look forward to hearing from you, learning from and with you, and we hope you have a great rest of the meeting. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone.